I discovered that I needed to separate from my first husband, and I was not able to do that. I didn't have the strength to do that or the courage to do that. So I was in that kind of staying on the fence scenario for 4.5 years. During that time, I fell into depression, so I don't use that term lightly. When I say I was depressed, I wasn't just sad. So I would wake up every day and I would cry from here, from my stomach. That's where it would come from. And I also had chronic anxiety as well. So that's the situation that I had for a very long time. I saw an article in the newspaper that said, because there was no Google back then, which said, "Are you feeling helpless and hopeless as if everybody else has a say in your life except you?" And I thought, oh my God, somebody understands me, because that's what it felt like. I'm the youngest of 5 from a European background, and divorce was unheard of in our family. And apart from that, everybody loved my first husband. He was not a gambler, not an alcoholic, and not a wife beater, my mum said. So what was my problem? They're the only reasons one would separate, right? So, and I had a little boy at the time. So at the time, my little boy was, under 4. So it's very hard to, that was the hardest thing, to break up a little boy's life and security. And so I went to the particular institution called the Ken Miller Institute, and the founder there, Don Treacher, is who I call my God, because he said things that I just didn't think of before. So we would have these lectures every single Thursday night in Caulfield, actually. And the second part was a facilitated group work, where he would have a facilitators in small groups. And I heard about so many concepts that I never thought of before. But the most magical time was when he would take us 4 times a year to Sorrento, and he would do group hypnosis on us. And I didn't know that it was group hypnosis, because at the time in the state of Victoria, you weren't allowed to say you were a hypnotherapist. It was illegal. So he called it guided visualization. And we would take our sleeping bags, and there would be about 200 of us in a big hall, and we would lie down on the ground, and he would take us through this amazing experience. And I would wake up, and not just me, but everybody would wake up with tears streaming down their eyes. And so then we would go to our groups, and we would talk about what happened. And incredible shifts. So to me, that was the beginning of my journey. And now I understand that that had to happen to me. It had to happen for me to be standing right here in front of you today, because I wouldn't have the, the absolute knowing what it feels like to be depressed and to be able to help those people unless I had experienced it myself. That's what I feel. So fast forward to that, there was a point in time when, I got rid of all my fears, limiting beliefs, emotionally and physically, became fitter in my 40s than I was in my 20s. And then the journey started of finding my passion. And the way that happened was that, it was at the point where I had been working 22 years in corporate. And I used to enjoy it. I used to love the challenge of the next job and the next promotion and doing the next project. But then it became soul destroying, because my whole job was to add to the bottom line of big corporations. That was my purpose. In fact, I worked in the Department of Regulation because I was an economist. And in regulation, my job was to convince the regulator that electricity prices needed to go up. That was my job. We had to put the cases forward, full knowing that really that's not in the best interest of the consumer. But that was my job. So how do you think that made me feel? It didn't feel like I was serving a great purpose in life. And so at that point, that was when struggling to get to work in terms of fighting the traffic, all the rest of it, getting into the city, and thinking, it just dawned on me one day that I'm only halfway. So I've been working for 22 years in corporate. I have at least another 22 years to go. It's not like I could walk away from my mortgage. So at that time, my husband and myself, we equally contributed to the mortgage, and we had the same salary. So we both earned the same salary. So walking away from a large mortgage meant the house would go, basically. We couldn't afford to keep the payments. So I couldn't decide to do something different and see if it worked. That was not an option. So what actually happened was I heard about a fellow colleague who was launching her book, and the book was called 30-something and Over It. And I thought, oh my God, I don't know what it's about. I'm 40-something and over it, but I've got to read the book. I read it in a day, and what she talked about was that we all have our baby that we need to nurture. So every single one of us has a baby, and we need to nurture that baby. And I thought, I don't even know what my baby is. Like, what is my baby? What is it? And so I started to notice my days, and I started to notice the parts of my days that gave me joy. And the parts of the day that gave me joy were the chats in the lunchroom, where people, at that time I was exercising quite a lot, and I had lost 14 kilos, and for a little person like me, that's actually quite a bit. And what actually happened was, people would say, you're amazing, Helen, like, I can always see you, no matter how busy you are, you're always going at lunchtime to do your run or whatever. At first I felt really guilty, like I would almost sneak to the lifts so that no one would see me, because no matter how busy I was, I had to do it. But then managers would come up to me and say, you know what, every time I see you, Helen, I feel guilty, but you're fantastic, you go, girl. And I thought, oh, they actually respect what I'm doing. It's not anything to be ashamed of. And so I thought, so I would have these chats with them, and they'd say, I could never do what you do. So I'd talk them through, of course you can. I never used to do this, now I do it. You know, and this is how I did it. And so they would come to me the next day and say, you wouldn't believe it. This is what I'm doing. And I'd get so excited for them. And so I thought, I think this is my baby. But what am I going to do? What kind of a job's that? Just talk to people? That's not a job. So then, of course, slowly, and I firmly believe this is the way that it happens, is that once you make a decision and you take one step, then the next door opens. You just need to take one step. You don't need to make a huge leap of faith, you just take one baby step. And my first baby step was to go and speak to people at personal training companies and perhaps become a personal trainer. And then I thought, oh, I don't want to sit here training people how to do squats. It's not really exciting. I'm more interested in what goes on in here. And then I actually completed, my first certificate that I completed was a sports nutrition certificate. So I completed that. It really bored me to tears. It really did. So, you know, I only studied as much as I needed to get the marks I needed to. And I thought, nah, I don't want to sit here advising people on exactly what they need to eat and how protein works in their body and how metabolism works. It's still not fascinating to me. And so slowly, the first thing that I did, the very, very first thing I did was I did my master prac of timeline therapy and NLP under Tad James himself. And then I did my diploma of hypnotherapy. And then every time I found a gap in anything that I learnt, I would do that. So, for example, one of the very first websites I ever had, where I didn't know back then as to how you put your words so that they actually make sense. I had something up there about providing a service on optimal performance, and I got all these phone calls about sexual performance. So I would get all these phone calls saying to me, premature ejaculation, all the rest of it. Do you do this? What do you think I said? Yes, this is what I do. I do that. And then I would like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So that's how my life ran. It was saying yes, I do it. That's what I do. And you might think, oh yeah, but that's fooling someone. But it's not. You elevate yourself to that level, and then that's who you become. So doors just opened. Within a couple of days, I got an email about a sex course by a hypnotherapist, Julia Lorenz, who was offering this sex course. So I signed up. I went, oh, yes, that's what I need to do. So that's not coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe in synchronicity. So I said, yes, I'm doing it. And I kept saying yes to everyone that called me. And next thing you know, I went and did the sex course. Before you knew it, I saw how many people, and I became an expert. And that's what happens from knowing nothing about that to, saying yes, learning about it, and then immediately applying it. So that's what I'm hoping, from you guys today, is that you, at least whatever you get from here, if anything, that you get something and that you do apply it, even if it's a way of thinking. So what actually happened with HypnoFit was I always imagined that HypnoFit would be a weight loss clinic because I lost weight and so on. And so they're the kind of clients I expected to come in. But then what I found was the people that I got the most joy helping were depressed women who needed to lose weight. So very quickly depression became my modality that I specialised in, and it was no wonder because I was that woman. So usually we're helping the people that we used to be. So usually our clients are who we used to be. That's who we usually help. We usually help our former self. So I then specialised in depression, and I always had a notion of doing a workshop, but it frightened me of standing in front of people and talking in front of people. So not workshop in front of hypnotherapists, but workshop in front of the general public. So I wanted to do that one-to-many model, but I was scared of it. And I remember being in supervision, and my supervisor at the time, she said, Helen, let's just put a date. Let's just put that date together. And so I put a date 9 months ahead because I wanted to commit to a date, but I didn't want it to be like in the next couple of months. And so I created my very first workshop called the Fast Track to Fabulous, from Fear to Fabulous in 6 steps. And I didn't actually create the work behind it, because a very key point is you don't do the work until you sell. So imagine how difficult it is to sell a workshop you haven't created yet. That was probably the hardest workshop I've ever sold in my life, because I had no reputation, I had no credibility, and I had no workshop created. So I just created in my head a skeleton of basically 6 headings that I would take people through, which is my journey from fear. And the first ticket was bought. So once the first ticket's bought, what has to happen? Has to happen. Once the first ticket is bought, you have to deliver. And to be honest, because I was so frightened of not having any people in my first workshop, my very, very, very first workshop, which was a 2-hour workshop, very first one, I called all my family. Yes, I've got a big family. Sisters, sister-in-laws, nieces, and I said, I can't have like 3-4 people sitting in there. You need to come in. And so they did. And I said to them, this is the only time I've done this, but it's hilarious because I said to them, you're not allowed to talk to each other. You've got to pretend you don't know each other. And it was very funny because I did an activity during the workshop with 2 people at a time. And, it was funny seeing niece and auntie speak to each other as if they didn't know each other. So it's got to start somewhere. And then after that, after I kept running those workshops, family didn't come after that. They did that one favour for me. Basically what happened was I helped one particular lady, her name was Christine, through depression. And she had gone to psychiatrists, she had gone to psychologists, she had gone to counsellors. And at the end of her program, we were completely rid of depression. And she said these words to me. As she was leaving, she said, Helen, you can't stay in this room. You just can't stay in this room. You've got to get out there. And I knew that I had to get out there to train hypnotherapists, but I was too frightened to. Like, who's going to listen to me? Like, who even knows me? But I knew that that's what I had to do. So fast forward, 3 years ago was the first time that I presented as in the USA in St. Louis, not St. Louis, and that blew me away when I got that invitation to present there. And subsequent to that, so I'll tell you very quickly that story because again, it's all about synchronicity and it's all about intention. So I believe if you have the intention, everything else works out for you. And so that's why I think this story is important. So what actually happened was 3 years ago, I was watching another documentary on Elvis Presley. For those of you who don't know, I'm a big Elvis Presley fan. Lawrence knows. He knows all my musical tastes. And I said to John at the time, I said, I need to go to Graceland. This is ridiculous. I'm going to be turning 50 soon and I haven't gone to Graceland. So I need to get there. What kind of a fan am I with not seeing Graceland? I have to get to Graceland. And so the very next morning, because I had decided, it wasn't like I hoped to, I knew that the following year I was going to go to Graceland. The very next morning I got an email in my inbox inviting me to be a presenter at the Heartland Hypnosis Conference in St. Louis from someone I'd never heard of before. I went, Google, St. Louis to Memphis, how far is it? 4 hours drive. Okay, I'm going. So he was very surprised. I emailed back and said, yeah, I'd love to come. And he was like, didn't expect me to say yes to his conference in St. Louis, all the way from Australia. Subsequent to that, I got lots of invitations from other people because they'd been at the conference. So I then became a keynote speaker at St. Louis the following year, and I was invited to Hypnothoughts Live in Vegas and to the National Guild of Hypnotists in Boston. And just about a month ago, I got invited to present to the UK convention in London in November. And I was only one of 12 people across the globe that was selected to present in the new HypnoBiz conference in New York in Times Square this May. And I'm not saying that to gloat, I really am not. I'm saying that because I really believe that if I can do it, anybody can. It's just a matter of if you want to, if you want to do it. So what your intention is, and just taking little baby steps towards that. Because never in a million years would I have imagined when I first formed HypnoFit and I got my first sale, and I was so euphoric that I got my first sale, that somebody was prepared to invest money in what I had to offer, that I would be speaking to people across the globe. Never would have imagined that. When I first started in hypnotherapy, and one of my sisters said, so how much are you going to charge for quit smoking? I said, $495 for 2 sessions. And the only reason I said that was because I knew other people were doing it. If other people were doing it, I could do it. That's where I picked the number out of. And she said, who's going to pay you $495? And this is at the point where no one had paid me $495. So it's about disregarding those sentences and believing in yourself, which is so important in the journey. Because in our profession, it's very easy to be brought down with negativity. So my mission, I don't know if you're aware, but I have a regular meetup every month in Kew, a Melbourne meetup, that is a not-for-profit meetup. So that meetup, it doesn't cover my expenses, and it's not intending to cover my expenses. The only reason I do it, I've been doing it for 16 months running now, is because I want our community to be stronger. That's what I want. So I want our community to help each other, to be supportive, to be there for one another. I have a different speaker every single month, and they come in, and it just warms my heart, because when I first started the meetup, you know, people would get in a room and they wouldn't really talk to each other, hypnotherapists, they didn't really know each other, and now they all know each other, they're great friends, and there's a real feeling of connection amongst all of them. Because my mission is that we are the go-to profession. So we are a $1 trillion industry, we really are. Part of the wellness industry. It's the next $1 trillion industry. And yet most hypnotherapists in Australia earn $40,893 a year, which is the ones that work, not the ones that don't work. There's plenty of them that study and don't do anything with it. In fact, 95% of all people that study just leave it. So the ones that work. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that if you're happy with that. Success means something different for every single one of us. But I know that most hypnotherapists want to make a big impact.